Thank you, thank you. So we do how is everybody doing? Yay! So my inner clock is, I flew in from Berlin, so I'm ready for dinner actually, so it's 5 p.m. on my end here. And we want to talk about DX in the front-end system. Fun fact about this title, this was actually a working title. Actually, what I wanted to talk about is back to boring, because I like to have fancy titles. And I want to just share some random facts about DX and what is happening in the front-end world. So I already got this quick introduction. I flew in on Monday from Berlin, Germany, just an easy 9 hours ride, minus 6 hours time difference. So this is who I am. I blog a lot, and I send out this newsletter that is called Web Weekly. And I work for a company that is called Checkly. So if you're building stuff for the web and you want to guarantee that you're not breaking your APIs or websites, and you want to use Playwright and Headless Chrome maybe to monitor your websites from around the globe, because we all break stuff all the time, you can give Checkly a try. Yeah, and as already mentioned, that's me. That's my newsletter every Sunday. Currently, I'm on a break because I had to prepare this talk here, but I'll be back on next Sunday. And I want to kick off this story with a little bit of history time for myself. I do front-end development now for 10, 15 years, and 10-ish, 12-ish years, my CTO just patted me on the back. I was building something, and he was a PHP person, or PHP developer, and he said, "Hey, Stefan, all this stuff that you're doing in the front end is so complicated, and this is so much code to build this website." Anybody been there, working in the front end? And I was just starting my career as a front-end developer, right? And it was Angular 1 days. That is good old days. Some people might remember this one. And my reply to this statement was like, "This is how we do it." And I didn't even have a real answer why we had so much complexity in the front end. And now, moving forward 10 years, we have SPA, single-page apps, we have MPAs, multi-page apps, and I hate this term, like 100%. MPAs, what is that? SSG, SSR, H-rendering, partial hydrations. The community is out of everything about React server components. Good, bad? Do you have an opinion already? I don't know what's happening. Resumability is another thing. And really, sometimes I'm dreaming of a boring tech stack because I just want to build good stuff for the web. Honestly, it's a lot, right? And when I started doing web development, we started with this, right? Hello World was maybe shipping 10 kilobytes to the client, compressed resources, which then became 50K. And I think that was all right. So now we have 2023, we're shipping 100K for the Hello World. Uncompressed, that is all getting a lot more. But even worse, the complexity of the stuff for a Hello World just went out of the roof. And everything is powered by this hundreds of megabytes heavy black hole called node modules. And sometimes I just think this is absurd because in the same time we're shipping more and more data to the client, right? And this is one of these statistics from HTTP Archive. If you care about web performance, you might have seen this. The average website right now is more than 2 megs. This is more than Doom than was released. And usually I don't care about these kind of things because right home in Germany I have a good mobile phone, I have a good Wi-Fi connection. But when I jump onto a plane from Berlin to Munich, from Munich to Toronto, this is what I see. This is my phone. And this is German, right? So you probably don't understand that. But what my mobile provider is telling me, "Hey, Stefan, welcome to Canada. You can access 1 megabyte of data for €1. Which is half a website. Better be a good website, for sure. So if you care about web performance, there's also cwvtech.report. The people dealing with web performance at Chrome, they aggregate all that data that is called crux. So you might know that when you use Chrome, Chrome is sending anonymous data back to Google, and then they're figuring out what data, or what experience do people have when they're visiting the web. So here you see, for example, a technology breakdown, and how often people have a good core Web Vital experience. So a good core Web Vital experience has a good LCB, largest contentful paint, a good first input delay, a good layout shift. And you see here that Pages like Astro that are built with Astro 11, these are pure pages that try to avoid using a lot of JavaScript. People have better experiences using these pages. And when we dive in a little bit, even good old school stuff like jQuery and stuff built with WordPress is still outperforming cutting edge frameworks in the field with the data that Chrome automatically aggregates than the others. And I think every technology presentation should have a jQuery appreciation tweet. So if you use jQuery and feel like you're behind, don't worry. Amazon is still shipping jQuery today, and I think it's powering the web, and it's not a bad thing, right? And you see that it's outperforming sometimes the new latest and greatest. So when we dive into the technologies, we see here Next and Nux, and I don't want to pick on technologies. These are just modern, all-in JavaScript frameworks that put the routing into the client. They also can render statically and on the server. It's complicated, but they do a lot of things with JavaScript. And you see there that only roughly on a mobile connection, 30% or 20% of the people visiting websites built with these technologies have actually a good time. And then you have purer approaches that go for more like a content-first, less JavaScript approach, and these numbers are kind of convincing here, giving a faster experience for the users and shipping good stuff. So what do we all use this JavaScript that we're shipping to the client for? And for a lot of years, I honestly thought it was just for YOLO, because we wanted to become front-end engineers. We wanted to craft. We wanted to build great stuff in the client. But now for a year or something, I changed my experience a little bit, because I don't think this is necessarily the case. I don't think this is what happened anymore. Jeremy Keyes once said that he feels overwhelmed by the pace of change. Yeah, feel that. But he says that JavaScript is meant to feel overwhelming. It's where we try stuff out. It's where stuff moves fast. And I think this is 100% true, because new solutions are often coming from the JavaScript ecosystem. And Jeremy also talks about a concept that is called pace layers. When we look at the web, it's built on top of several layers, right? We have HTTP, we have HTML, we have CSS, and we have JavaScript. And all these layers evolve at different speed. How often do we have a change on the protocol level? Well, we had H2 coming at some point, but it's not happening that often. HTML changes new attributes, new elements. It's not happening that often. New CSS attributes? Well, every now and then. New stuff in JavaScript? Yesterday, right? But I think the reason for that is that when we started building for the web platform wasn't ready for what we wanted to do. And this web is still not ready for what we wanted to do. But honestly, we'll get there sooner than later, because there are now initiatives like Interop, which includes all browser vendors, and they're working together, asking the developer communities, hey people, what do you need on the web? And then they figure out a change set that they all agree on that they want to fix and implement across browsers so that we don't have to polyfill and worry about all these things. And then these things are tracked, and all the browser vendors are committed to shipping a good web platform so that we can build good stuff. And in 2022, it includes aspect ratio, cascade layer, color spaces, dialog grid, flag, subgrid. This list is not complete, and this was last year. This is browser vendors collaborating on building good stuff so that I can build good stuff. In 2023, we're talking about container queries, has, inert, property, import, met, font features, and all these lists are not complete. But all this stuff is coming sooner than later. Then there's also OpenUI, which is a bunch of smart people coming together, analyzing all the design systems out there to figure out what elements are actually missing on the web. What are people actually building all over and over and over again? Has someone built something like this from scratch? Like a tooltip? Like a display block, display none? Isn't it ridiculous that we have to do that all the time, all over again? So how hard can it be to show a tooltip? Well, in the web, actually, it's super hard. It's so hard that we have libraries like Floating UI and Popper that have more than 10 million weekly downloads to show a little box after button click, right? What you see here is an example that I'm running on localhost for my Web Weekly sign-up page. There's a little asterisk that you can click. It reacts to keyboard interactions, automatically closing. But now check this out. The box is going into a different direction. And it's going down when there's enough space. And it's figuring out automatically where it should be. And all this works without JavaScript. So how does it work? There's a new spec in the making that is called popover. So what you see is that I'm building a code pan, and I'm including a button and a div that has a popover attribute, which hides the hello world. And now I can connect these two with popover target and can give an ID. And I now have a button that can open something and close something without using JavaScript. Isn't that exciting? I mean, it's a little bit sad that this is exciting, but but how could you position something so that it's not falling off the screen? This is a little bit further down the future, but I think it's actually cool stuff. So we can have this toggle button, and we can give it an anchor name. And here we have this something with the ID something that has, first of all, it's connected to this toggle button with anchor name, but then it has new stuff that is called position fallback. And now, wait for some fancy CSS. Check this out. Add position fallback, add try. This allows people to write CSS and tell the browser, hey, try to position it next to this anchor, and if it's falling off the viewport, try the next one, and then try the next one. And then we don't have to install something using JavaScript to do exactly that. So where are we here with that? So popover is already in Chrome. It's coming to Safari and Firefox. Behind the flag and anchor positioning is still a little bit in the making, but I'm super excited about having these in the platform itself, because they allow me to write better components with less code. So how hard can it then be to maintain my CSS code base? When I started doing CSS, I was using these two. Anyone? Sass? Compass? Sass? Compass? So I think Compass was actually cool. It has this automatic sprite generation thing. Does anyone remember that? I think it was pretty cool. Over the time, I used these tools to manage my CSS code bases, but only for 3 things primarily. It was variables, color functions, and CSS nesting. We have variables figured out, right? In CSS, we have custom properties. These work, they're great. Everybody's using them. But what about color functions? So let me show you something. So here we have what is called, or what will be called, relative colors. And we have this little box here that has the background color pale violet red, which is defined in a hex code. So let me restructure that a little bit to give it a custom property. And now check this out. I can use an RGB function, use the from keyword, and now depending on the function that I use, I can reuse these variables over there to shuffle stuff around. Which means, let's flip to color channels, right? Should we? Woo. I mean, that's totally useless, but green is now on the red channel and red is on the green channel. Or let's flip it again. And I cannot tell you what just happened because it's mind-boggling to say which channel is on which one now. But we can obviously change that also to a different color space, which is more useful. Here we have hue, saturation, and lightness. So we could go in and could say, hey, make pale violet red 20% lighter. Pretty decent. Or maybe remove all the saturation to have a nice little gray shape over here. Or if that is your jam and you want to go into these new color spaces that can display colors that we haven't seen on the web before, it's super weird. I'm not talking about this here right now, but if you haven't checked OK, LCH, whew. But what I'm all pointing at is color design system tokens will go into the platform in pure CSS. So what you see here is that I build a component that takes a random color and builds up a color system with a single change. Everything is in CSS. So this will go into a future article on my blog. Didn't make it to publish it. So it uses relative colors. It uses a JavaScript function that's called showPicker, which is cross-browser supported if you want to open date pickers and color pickers and all that stuff. This is at your service. And it's using some fancy stuff that is, for some reason, not progressing, but color contrast. When you check the button and when I change the color, you see that it will change the text color depending on the background color that I choose. This eventually will go into CSS. Browser support is not quite there yet, but at the current pace in the last 1.5 years, things are moving fast. So if I see a few people nodding here, watch out what's happening. Good stuff is in the pipeline. So what about CSS nesting, right? This was one of the reasons why we use CSS preprocessors. It's somewhat there, which has surprised me this week. This is shipping already in Chrome, Edge, Safari, and in Firefox in 3 weeks. This is native CSS. So you can nest your classes, your IDs, whatever you want to do in CSS into each other. And this is just a beautiful user experience so that you can avoid using Sass, Less, PostCSS, or whatever you want to do. If you used Sass or something, you might point out, hey, Stefan, you don't need these ampersands. If you go all in with these kind of things, be aware that native CSS nesting is not 100% like preprocessor CSS nesting. So you have to check that some things are not breaking. So native CSS nesting, for example, you can only nest when the next line includes an ampersand and add a colon, because otherwise the CSS parser is kind of getting wild and doesn't understand what you want to do. So if you want to do these kind of things, you have to rewrite or restructure your CSS a little bit. But I think overall it's worth it because I can drop a little bit of my build pipeline, right? I can start concatenating instead of processing my CSS. And this helps me to maintain my CSS code base. But how hard could it be to build responsive components? Whew. Well, here from our website, right, it hides the large navigation on a certain viewport width. And this is the code for that, right? Some people write CSS to have fixed defined breakpoints, right here and here and here. I usually don't do that because I think it's depending on the component, because I only want to break a component when it doesn't work on a certain viewport size anymore, right? This is why my code bases always have these magic numbers in their breakpoints. It's like 27 something, 32, 41. And it's depending on the viewport, which means when I, for example, change the padding on this entire website, well, my breakpoint doesn't work anymore, right? Because my component depends on the viewport. Who thought this is a good idea? Well, nobody, actually, because the web developer community is asking about container queries for almost a decade, and everybody's always like, nope, that's not possible, because if you style something and you want it to be dependent on the width and you change the things in between, it will affect how wide it is, and then you trigger this endless loop, which will make the world collapse, right? But last year, somehow, some person had an idea, and in a year, we had container queries for some reason. It was super weird. So let me just show you an example. This works cross browsers. So we have a cart, and I'm using CSS nesting here, so be aware this isn't working in Firefox yet. But container queries are working. So I have here a Doggo component, and I have a container that has display flex. Guess what? What I can do now is I can give it a container type, inline size, and I can say when this container is wider than 400 pixels, please change the flex layout. And you see, well, the text is moving to the right. This is container queries. This is what I actually wanted to do for the last decade instead of writing media queries. But now the image of the dogs are getting a little bit big, right? With container queries, there are also new values or new units coming up. So if you want to style stuff depending on their container width, you can use, for example, CQW, which is 1% of the query container width. But let's move on with fancy CSS stuff. Let's say we have 3 cards, and I only want to style cards that include an image of a dog, right? How would I do that? I could now go into my rendering, and I could say, hey, this card has a dog image, right? What I could also do is something that will change how we write CSS. I could use a has pseudo-selector. And what this allows is to reach out. Some people call it the parent selector. It is way more than a parent selector. But what I'm doing here is I'm selecting all cards that include an image that have in their source attribute the word dog. And then I'm giving it a nice little dogified background. This is how we will change. This will change how we write CSS once this lands. It's currently behind the flag in Firefox, but it's part of Interop 2023, which means the target is that it will land sooner than later. With CSS has, what we can do is we can change a lot of approaches and really changing the mindset that we have about CSS. If we, for example, want to have an article have a 2/3, 1/3 grid when there's an aside element in there, use has. If you want to style the form when there is somewhere inside of this form an invalid input element, use has. Maybe you want to shift around the entire body when there is a toggle for mobile navigation inside of the body, use has. I think you get the idea, right? This is changing how we will write and use CSS. If you want to learn more about this, you can check out this article. So Yuna once said that CSS has become a more complete, mature language that works better with the way we build websites today, and amen. But let's talk about a little bit about HTML. How hard could it be to load a perfect image? Anyone guilty of writing something like this? Like a monster like this? What this picture element does is it checks for browser format support like WebP. In source element, it defines source set, so it tells the browser what image widths are available. Then it uses sizes to tell the browser, hey, this image will be laid out in that way once the CSS is loaded, but I'm telling you that now because you want to request that image before the CSS, which is duplicated information. It always bugged me, and then now we can do lazy loading on images, and this is all cross-browser supported. But isn't that weird a little bit that we define sizes when there's a loading lazy? Because the browser is figuring out, hey, this image is now laid out and it's close to enter the viewport. Isn't CSS ready? Isn't it there? And people thought the same, thank God. So for lazy loaded images, we will be able to remove the sizes or flip it to auto because the browser has all the information that we need anyways. So if images are lazy loaded, let the browser pick the best size. Thank you. This is coming to Chrome in, I think, a month or two. All browser vendors say, thumbs up, good stuff, we like this. While we're at that, wouldn't it be cool if we could have something like that and have a meta element in the head and say, hey, I'm using an images API that automatically resizes, and I don't care, I don't want to define that. I have never done spec work, but I would love to have image components to be maintainable with a nice and solid developer experience. And I'm not alone with that, right? People are abstracting away all that stuff. So we have here two libraries. We have unpix and pix, and Vercel famously ships their own image component. So lastly, how hard can it be to build delightful UI? I'm not kidding you, and I'm a little bit faster than I'm supposed to be, but I'm not kidding you. This slide is in my talks for the last 4 years. For 4 years, I'm showing this slide because I want the web to look like this. Especially in the mobile space, we're used to this. You click something and something is moving into something else, and something is closing and morphing. On the web, we don't have that for reasons, because it's just too hard to do these kind of things. But let me show you something. We have here a code pen, and here we have the speakers from today. And it includes a little bit of JavaScript, so it has a speakers data array. It has a shuffle function that I copied from Stack Overflow, but not ChatGPT. And here we have a render speakers function that does some inner HTML, right? Pretty spaghetti, not framework code. Everybody probably has written some code like this at some point when starting with JavaScript. And then I'm rendering the speakers. So when I now click the button, we're rendering this array. Check this out. So what we can do is we can call document start view transition, and we can move these DOM manipulations inside of this function. And check what's happening now. Well, there's a little bit of a crossfading happening, right? Let's move on, and let's add a style attribute here with something that's called a view transition name, and give it an ID. This now still looks the same. It's still fading. Something's happening over here. But it's not too exciting yet. But last step for this journey, let's shuffle the array. Let's reorder all the speakers when we render a new person. And this is just like, this is it. This is keeping track, transitioning one element into a different stage. And this is controllable via CSS. So there are new pseudo elements coming to Chrome. It's already in Chrome. And now let's rotate everybody and do something like that. Pew, pew, pew. You've just seen how hard it will be, or how easy it will be to transition things from one state to the other. And I think it's just ridiculous. So the way that this works is this is a new spec that is called view transitions. It's already in Chrome. And you can treat it as progressive enhancement, right? We haven't had these things for the last decade. Just opt in for the 70%, 80% Chrome URL. I didn't look up the number. But what you can check is you can check for start view transition. If it's not available, just update the DOM, right? If it is there, call start view transition. And what this does is the browser will take literally a screenshot of the elements in the DOM before this is called, and then it will take a new screenshot after you modified all the DOM states there. And then it will just transition it somehow. Magic, right? So what we see here is that I click the button, and you see under the root element that there are new pseudo elements available that are the previews and the later stage of this transition. And this is why we've seen this little fading happening after we called start view transition, because it was fading to HTML images. Yeah, this is how it looks. And after we applied view transition name, we told, hey, we don't want to only transition the root element, but we want to transition different elements. So what happens then is that Chrome, in that case, took screenshots of all the elements and was applying a morph or a transition from one state to the other. And here we see all the transition groups and screenshots that have been taken because we have defined a transition name. This is an entire talk by itself, but this is in Chrome stable, which is whew. And you can now build stuff like that. I mean, look at how beautiful this prototype is. It's the tiny things, right? But I want the web to look like this. I want to see this stuff every day. But so far, I've only showed you that the JavaScript-powered implementation of that, right? Wouldn't it be cool if that would work? So you might have figured I'm a vanilla guy, right? I don't want to use too much JavaScript. Wouldn't it be cool if that would work for HTML navigations too? This is in the making. So multi-page transitions are currently behind the flag in Chromium, and you have to opt in via a meta element to say, hey, I want to allow this stuff for the same origin. And this works on my website, so check that out. If I click a link anywhere in the button, it's automatically morphing into the headline. And this is all different HTML navigations. It's requesting a new HTML element. And if you want to learn more, Adam from the Chrome DevRels gave this presentation. It's all different HTML elements or HTML navigations morphing one state into the other. This is the future, so it's only working behind the flag in Chrome yet, but this is going to change how the web looks and feels. So I'm on the right here. So if you want to learn more, Jake Archibald was in favor of implementing the spec and helping the Chrome folks to have a JavaScript implementation that is controllable via CSS, betting on the platform, giving us a nice developer experience. So we're on the finish line. Brian just earlier said, DX is about the practices and tools that empower developers to produce grand end-user experience. And that is a German beer, and he told me that this is Oktoberfest, so that's a nice little combination here. And I think that when we consider the web platform as a whole, we didn't have, at least not on the browser level, we didn't have the practices and tools to produce great user experiences. But now, finally, I think the web is catching up. And the JavaScript ecosystem leads or has led the way to the next web. And hopefully I was able to show you some examples here that I think are fascinating. And the next web will come with a better developer and end user experience. Just because we're now pushing the boundaries and JavaScript led us there. But every talk should finish with a nice hot take, right? Even though we're getting better with the developer experience on the web platform, like, oh, I still would love us to kind of take a step back and consider what tools do we use for what job, right? I don't know what you're working on. You might work on video platforms, blogs, shops, marketing sites, games, productivity apps. But I think we're slowly but surely getting the tools to avoid over-engineering everything and shipping less code to the client, because this will give me a nice debugging experience, but probably leave the same user experience for the people visiting my stuff. So, hot take, if your site feels like a boring multi-page app, maybe it should be one, maybe not. And I want to close the entire thing with a quote from Marie Kondo. So if JavaScript doesn't bring users joy, thank it and throw it away. And I didn't come up with this joke, so it's in the Cost of JavaScript from 2023, so it's from Adias Mani, probably. Maybe Marie Kondo said that, but I think it makes a nice clothing. Here are the slides if you want to check out all the slides. Thank you, everybody. I'm Stefan.